In a world that is dominated by crossover SUVs, there still are some compact cars, and some of them are offered with hybrid powertrains. There's a Honda Civic Hybrid and the Hyundai Elantra Hybrid. So which of these two compact hybrid cars is better? Let's go for a drive and find out. Starting things off with the Hyundai Elantra Hybrid, it is powered by a 1.6-liter naturally aspirated four-cylinder engine. On its own, this engine doesn't produce that much power. It's barely over 100 horsepower and pound-feet of torque. But combined with the electric motor, it produces 139 horsepower and 195 pound-feet of torque. Now that still isn't a whole lot of power, but thanks to the high torque number, it doesn't feel that sluggish. Setting off from a stop, it doesn't feel like as though it's impeding anybody behind it, and on highways, it'll keep up with the flow of traffic going at 100 kilometers an hour or 62 miles an hour without any issues. Just like most other hybrid vehicles, when you're setting off from a stop, the engine is going to provide the power to get you up to speed, and then once you are up to speed, the electric motor takes over. From time to time, if the 1.32 kilowatt-hour battery pack is fully charged, then you can actually set off from a stop at a pretty decent pace just using electricity. One unique feature about this hybrid powertrain in the Hyundai Elantra is that it doesn't use an eCVT like the Civic Hybrid. Instead, it uses a 6-speed dual-clutch transmission. Now, don't confuse this for some sort of Porsche PDK dual-clutch transmission, because it still is kind of slow. Put your foot down and it takes approximately a second or so before the transmission actually downshifts and you get going. But the gear shifts are smooth, which is exactly what you want from a commuter type of vehicle, and you can take over shifting if you want by switching the gear selector into the S mode. Now driving the Honda Civic Hybrid, it uses a bigger engine than the one in the Hyundai Elantra Hybrid. This one is 2 liters instead of 1.6 liters, but still naturally aspirated and still a 4-cylinder engine. On its own, the engine produces about 140 horsepower, but combined with the more powerful electric motors, this is the second most powerful Honda Civic that's on sale today, right behind the Civic Type R. It produces a combined output of 200 horsepower and 232 pound-feet of torque. That is about the same horsepower as the Civic Si, but obviously more torque. This car feels much faster than the Elantra Hybrid. It gets off the line more quickly, it accelerates up to speed on highways more quickly, and it just all feels so much more effortless. The hybrid system operates in the same way as the one in the Elantra Hybrid, so when you set off from a stop, most of the time it'll be using the gasoline engine, and then once you're up to speed, the electric motor takes over for brief periods. But unlike the Elantra Hybrid, when you're slowing down, you can actually control how much regenerative braking you get. If you pull on the plus or minus paddle shifters, then you can control how much regenerative braking you get from a few different levels. If you drive the car in the normal drive mode, then whatever regen setting that you have it at, it will automatically reset after a few seconds. But if you switch the car into sport mode, then it will lock the regenerative braking setting to whatever you want it to be at. However, unlike the Elantra Hybrid, you do not have control over the gear shifts in the Civic Hybrid because it uses an eCVT and it doesn't have any sort of virtual gears. It does, however, try to replicate virtual gears whenever you really put your foot down on it, but otherwise you can't actually control it. To drive, the Honda Civic is the better of the two. The steering weight and feel is better in this Civic. It's a little bit sharper, and there's a little bit less body roll through corners than in the Elantra Hybrid. And finally, as for the fuel economy, the most important bit of these two cars, both of them on paper can achieve the same city fuel economy at 4.8 liters per 100 kilometers. However, on highways, it's the Elantra Hybrid that is supposedly more fuel efficient than the Civic Hybrid, which is a little bit counterintuitive to me because that car just has 6 gear ratios to play around with, whereas the Civic Hybrid has theoretically an infinite amount of gear ratios to use because it has an eCVT. But that's on paper. In the real world, I've been averaging the exact same fuel economy between both cars, 4.8 liters per 100 kilometers. And I've been driving both cars through the same environments, both in a city and on highways. So when it comes to performance, I think that the Civic Hybrid has the Elantra Hybrid beat in every way. Despite the sportier characteristics of the Honda Civic, both cars exhibit a similar ride quality. Most potholes and manhole covers don't feel too harsh as the tires drive over them, and the shunts are isolated from the occupants inside the cabin. But rougher roads will be very evident in these two cars as the suspension can only do so much. Where they differ is with cabin noise. The Civic Hybrid provides a more serene environment than the Hyundai Elantra Hybrid. Tire noise, engine noise, and wind noise is far better subdued in the Civic than in the Elantra. Now let's take a look at the interiors of these two cars, starting off with the Hyundai Elantra. And on paper, I know I'm saying on paper a lot in this review, but on paper, the Elantra has more headroom across both rows of seats than the Honda Civic. And both cars have similar amounts of front legroom, but the Elantra has more rear legroom than in the Honda Civic. However, in the real world, it feels like as though the Hyundai Elantra has a little bit less headroom than in the Civic. So with this seat at its lowest point right now, up here in the front seats, my hair feels pretty close to the headliner. It's not actually touching, but it feels pretty close. Whereas in the Honda Civic, there's a little bit more space between my hair and the top of the headliner. Mind you, both of these cars do have sunroofs. Also in the Elantra, both of the front seats are manually adjustable. Only the driver has height adjustment, the passenger has no height adjustment. Whereas in the Honda Civic, both of the front seats are power operated. But just like in the Elantra, only the driver has height adjustment, not the passenger. Back here in the Elantra, the interior is very simple and straightforward to use. You have physical climate controls as well as physical buttons and a volume knob for the infotainment system. The infotainment system is the same one that is used in quite a few other Hyundai vehicles, and it's been used for the last few years. Very straightforward to use. There are some sub-menus if you want to find some specific functions of it, but otherwise pretty straightforward to navigate around. It does support wireless Apple CarPlay and wireless Android Auto. As for the materials in this Hyundai Elantra, they're not the greatest. There's hard plastics on this passenger handle. And of course there's scratchy hard plastic on the upper portions of the door panels. Some of it is a little bit softer, like this mid portion, but for the most part, it's all just hard, cheap feeling plastic. There is also some gloss black plastic on the center console, and most of it is around the cup holders. So if you have coffee in the morning and it spills, I suggest you wipe it right away, because otherwise this material is just going to attract dust, fingerprints, coffee stains, scratches, you name it. So if you want this to look good over, say, 2-3 years, then you'd better take care of it. And that's about it for the front seats of the Hyundai Elantra. Now let's go check out the Honda Civic. Now sitting inside the Civic Hybrid, as I said in the Elantra, it does feel like as though in the real world, this Civic has just a little bit more space, particularly with headroom. It doesn't feel like as though my hair is so close to the headliner. Also, this seat does feel like as though it's lower down to the ground than the one in the Elantra Hybrid at its lowest point. And as I said, these are power operated, not manually adjustable. Legroom though feels exactly the same for my 6'4" height. As for the materials in this Honda Civic, they do feel a little bit better. There still is some gloss black around the air vents and on the door panels, but for the most part, the plastics feel just a little bit softer on the upper portions of the door panels as well as on the dashboard. And this weave looking plastic on the center console looks much better than just plain gloss black plastic. Of course, there are some harder and cheaper feeling plastics on the lower portions of the center console as well as the door panels, but that's fine, I think. Also, the climate control knobs have a very satisfying tactile feel to them every time that you twist them, and the buttons for the heated seats, for example, feel just a little bit better than the ones in the Elantra. The infotainment system in the Civic has Google built in, so you have access to Google Maps, Google Assistant, the Play Store, and so on, but you can still connect wireless CarPlay if you're an Apple user. This system does allow you to customize the different icons on the home screen and also add them to your favorites list on the very side. And just like the one in the Elantra, it is pretty simple to navigate around. In the back seats, despite what it says on paper, the Elantra Hybrid and the Civic Hybrid felt as though they had an equal amount of space for my 6'4" stature behind my driving position. My hair gently brushed up against the headliner and my knees were right up against the back of the front seats. But the difference between the two is in the details. The back of the front seats in the Hyundai is made out of hard plastic. In the Civic, it's soft leather. This means that you won't get a bruise on your knees if you sit for long periods in the back seats of the Honda versus the Hyundai. Where these two cars really differ in terms of interior space is with their cargo capacity. Of course, this Civic is the hatchback version, so it has almost 700 liters of cargo space, whereas the Hyundai Elantra Hybrid is only available as a sedan, so it only has just over 400 liters of cargo space. But even if you did get the Civic as a sedan in hybrid form, it still has a little bit more cargo capacity in its trunk compared to the Elantra Hybrid. Both cars are equipped similarly, but the Honda does get a few more gadgets for the higher price tag. More on that in a little bit. In Canada, both have heated front seats along with heated steering wheels, power sunroofs, dual zone automatic climate controls, backup cameras, wireless CarPlay and wireless Android Auto connectivity, built-in navigation systems, and wireless phone charging pads. But the Civic can be equipped with more if you opt for the Sport Touring trim. In the Hyundai, there's an 8-speaker audio system, while in the Civic, it comes with 12 on the top trim. The upholstery is real leather in the Civic versus synthetic leather in the Elantra. There are the heated rear seats that I mentioned earlier, and the Civic is equipped with front and rear parking sensors, whereas the Elantra doesn't get any. Again, these are features that are available on the more expensive Civic Sport Touring. It is worth noting though that the Elantra Hybrid does come better equipped for the American market compared to the Canadian market. So let's recap. The Honda Civic Hybrid drives better than the Hyundai Elantra Hybrid. It's also just as fuel efficient. It's a little bit quieter on the inside, also a little bit more spacious. It has more cargo capacity, especially if you get it in the hatchback form, and you get a few more gadgets and gizmos. So it's the overall winner, right? Well, there is a price to pay for all that. Here in Canada, you can get the hybrid powertrain on the Hyundai Elantra on just one trim, this luxury. Whereas for the Civic, you can have it as a sport hybrid or a sport touring hybrid, which is what this one is, in addition to being a hatchback or a sedan. But both of those trims are more expensive than the Hyundai Elantra Hybrid. Is it worth all that extra money? Well, maybe not this sport touring hatchback because it's almost $40,000 Canadian before fees and taxes. So I'd probably go for the more lower sport trim. That one, still more expensive than the Elantra Hybrid, but I think it is worth it. But that's just my opinion. What about you? Which one would you pick? In the meantime, if you would like to know more about either of these two cars, I have a more detailed written review of them over on my website. You can find that link in the video description or click on the pop-up banner right up there. And as always, I will see you in the next car, truck, or most likely it'll be an SUV next time. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and see you in the next one.